Welcome. This is History Theory, and today we discuss the question, what if the Reconquista had failed? But before we think about what might have happened, we have to think about what really happened. The Iberian Peninsula, located in the southwest corner of Europe, was a tumultuous place in the early Middle Ages. In the year 711 CE, Muslim forces from North Africa crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and incorporated the lands they found into the Islamic Caliphate. The southern region of Iberia in which this occurred would be known as Al-Andalus, or Andalusia. Muslim-led nations, sometimes collectively known as the Moors, included the Caliphate of Cordoba and the Almoravid Empire, and they would rule over these areas for the span of almost 800 years. However, in the northern region of Iberia, there existed a number of smaller Christian kingdoms, such as the kingdoms of Leon and Castile. The Catholic Christians in these kingdoms were often in conflict with their Muslim neighbors to the south, and there was much cultural and religious division between the two sides. Sponsored by the Pope and other influential Catholic orders, many Catholics in these areas were motivated to rid the Iberian Peninsula of the Muslim presence, in a conflict that would be known as the Reconquista, which is Spanish and Portuguese for reconquest, which is exactly what they wanted to do with the Iberian Peninsula. Over the following centuries, the northern Christian kingdoms aimed to conquer all Muslim lands in Andalusia and other Islamic territories in the region. Due in part to internal instability and unrest in Muslim-controlled areas, which in turn was probably caused by the Catholic warmongering, Christian states slowly but surely gained more and more territory in Iberia as they pushed the Muslims farther and further south. The last Islamic state in Iberia, the Emirate of Granada, fell to Christian forces in the year 1492, a year that became important for other reasons, but we'll get to that later. By this time, the formerly small Christian kingdoms would become the nations of Spain and Portugal, who would cement their rule over the Iberian Peninsula until the present day. The aftermath of the Reconquista resulted in the Spanish Inquisition, which was the forced conversion or exile of anyone who wasn't Catholic, that is, all the Jews and Muslims who still lived in the Iberian Peninsula. Those who did not convert or leave were often killed. The Reconquista also resulted in the creation of the nations of Spain and Portugal, whose impact on the rest of the world would be major and have extremely influential and often destructive effects. But what if the Muslim presence in Iberia had remained strong and influential? What if the Reconquista had failed? First of all, many people of non-Catholic beliefs would still be living in relative peace in southern Iberia. The Muslims were tolerant of people of different religions and only gave them the jizya, the small tax on non-Muslims in Islamic territories. This was relative paradise compared to Christian-ruled areas, however, where religious persecution was becoming more and more common. Catholic crusaders would still have attacked, but in this timeline, the armies of Cordoba or the Almohads would have been able to successfully repel the invasions. In this case, the eyes of the Catholic Church would have likely been fixed on the Iberian Peninsula. Perhaps the Crusades for the Holy Land would never have transpired, with all the attention on the Islamic nations in southwestern Europe. Many of the major port cities that would have belonged to Spain or Portugal after the Reconquista would still be under Muslim rule. The city of Lisbon, for example, the center of Portuguese exploration and colonization, and of the Portuguese Golden Age, wasn't conquered by the Portuguese armies until the year 1147 CE. Portuguese ships most likely wouldn't have ventured around the Horn of Africa and made it into the Indian Ocean. The Portuguese presence in India and Indonesia was mostly an unpleasant one, as the Portuguese sailors and merchants would often attack and conquer cities to make into their trading ports, as they did with the city of Goa. Portuguese colonization in India, Africa, and other parts of the world would have likely never occurred if the Muslim armies kept control of southern Iberia. The immense power of the Spanish after the Reconquista probably wouldn't have happened either. Christopher Columbus was a sailor from the Italian city of Genoa, and asked the Spanish royalty for funding to conduct his voyage to the East Indies in 1492. The only reason Spain agreed to pay for Columbus's seemingly impossible voyage was because, that very year, the Reconquista had just been finished with the destruction of the Islamic State of Granada. Filled with religious and political zeal, the Spanish were easier to convince that Columbus was going to succeed in his quest. Just like how people are more willing to make poor decisions after completing an important task. Or, in this case, after killing tens of thousands of people and establishing a purely Catholic dominion on the Iberian Peninsula. But anyway, because of this, Columbus was able to establish his lasting legacy in the name of the Spanish Empire. Had the Reconquista not happened, Columbus would have been rejected and the Spanish probably wouldn't have set foot in the Americas for quite some time. And if this had been the case, the peoples in the Americas would have had more time before the devastating effects of foreign diseases and European imperialism. The Incan Empire in the South American Andes might have had the chance to become strong enough during this time to repel the Spanish conquistadors, as they very almost did in the early 1500s. Places all over Latin America likely wouldn't have had the Catholic Spanish influence, which is a strong part of their modern culture today. Early European imperialism around the world might have been significantly delayed, or maybe even prevented. And who knows what other effects would have occurred because of this? Without Portugal and Spain to lead the way, maybe nations such as Britain and France would never have been able to establish mighty colonial empires of their own. The history of the European Renaissance and Protestant Reformation would certainly have been altered. Western European influence around the world might have been replaced with lasting nations in their native regions. China, self-sufficient from what it had with its own borders, would have remained at the top of the technological and economic world, never to have been subdued by European powers. Peoples in Africa may never have experienced the brutal colonialism of 19th century Europe, or at least would have been able to defend themselves more easily. European nations might not have acquired the massive wealth that they did. The Reconquista opened the gates to European power around the world, and, had it not happened, the history of the world might have gone very differently. This has been History Theory. Subscribe for more content, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.